its 17th month. Previously, men from the ages of 18 and 27 were required to perform a year of military service or equivalent training as of January 1st. That will apply to Russians. The move is the latest by Moscow to widen the pool of eligible recruits since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Moscow does not release casualty figures, but a new U.S. intelligence document from February this year estimated Russia had suffered today at 43,000 killed and 180,000 wounded. The law passed on Tuesday also bans men from leaving Russia from the day they return to Russia. That lessons here on the Hello That's what it's called a unity mobilization.
Now, Russia's war in Ukraine has continued for over a year. The EU, the United States, many other countries have imposed extensive sanctions on Russia to restrict financial and technological capabilities for warfare. Last year, some experts predicted a contraction of up to 15% in Russia's GDP and said the war will wipe out 15 years of economic growth. However, the IMF is holding positive outlooks on Russia's economy, boosting its forecast for 2023 GDP growth to 1.5% from a prior view of 0.7%. On Tuesday, during a meeting focused on economic issues, President Vladimir Putin said Russia is a sign of inflation acceleration. He said the supply of Russian producers lag behind demand.
At the moment, it is more than there are only signs that it is important to maintain the price stability of our economy to ensure the balance of supply and demand.
Putin also praised Russia's GDP growth, which according to him is expected to increase by more than 2% by the end of 2023. He said, and I'm quoting here, this growth will fully win back last year's decline.
For the whole of 2022, the GDP decreased by 2.1%. Then, from January to May of this year, it grew by 0.6%. And the pace accelerated from month to month to 5.2% of May. We expect that by the end of the year, the GDP will add nearly 2%. Remember, different forecasts, and IMF forecast was 2.7%, and our forecast was about 9%. The Prime Minister and I spoke recently. We hope there will be more than 2%. Thus, this will fully win back last year's decline.
Some experts view the Russia-Ukraine war as a manifestation of the renewed geopolitical rivalry between major world powers. Analysts say Moscow is seeking to alter the Western-led system prevailing since the end of the Cold War. Western allies say the war has broken the entire security architecture built patiently on the European continent over many decades. The 31-nation NATO alliance says it is doing everything possible to avert a war similar to one that ravaged Europe 80 years ago. Despite the United States and allies' continued ambitious efforts to bolster the Ukrainians, there are no signs of an endgame in this war. The Russia-Ukraine conflict seems destined to enter an even more complicated phase in the months ahead.
Welcome to Beyond Riders One. Our top focus of this hour, Germany has criticized tactics used by the Ukrainian army. The German armed forces have accused the Ukrainian army of ignoring the Western training methods. According to the media report, Ukrainian forces are splitting their Western-trained troops into small units, and the number of soldiers range from 10 to 30. The report highlighted that Ukraine is not using their Western-trained troops and superior weapons. The leaked German assessments claim this is acting as a disadvantage for the Ukrainian troops, adding that a joint combat leadership is not recognizable in Ukraine. Also, according to media reports, later today, the German Defense Ministry is expected to release a statement over the leaked document. Since Russia invaded Ukraine, Germany has remained a staunch ally of Ukraine. The country even trained Ukrainian troops as a part of European Union's military aid to Ukraine. Reports suggest so far some 5,000 soldiers have been trained by German instructors. Ukrainian troops were trained in operating electric tanks and advanced air defense systems. James Jackson is a journalist and also a political analyst. He is joining us live from Berlin. Hello, James, and thank you very much for joining us on Beyond Wild as One. I'll begin by asking you, what do you make of the timing of Germany's statement, especially coming in the midst of a counteroffensive which Russia has claimed to have failed?
So you have to remember, this isn't an official statement by the German government. This is a leaked document by the Bundeswehr, the German military, which was leaked to the Bild Zeitung, which is a popular newspaper here. It's meant to be a sober assessment of reality, but because it's true that the Ukrainian counteroffensive isn't going as quickly as some people had hoped. But I was working on this story yesterday for The Telegraph, and it has actually been received quite controversially, not just by Ukrainian, but also by British defence officials who my colleagues spoke to, and they found that they thought that the tone of the report was quite patronising, as did Sergei Sumlenin here in Berlin, a think tanker from the European Resilience Initiative Centre. And effectively, this morning, there has been a reaction already, well, you could say it's a reaction to this, which is that €250 million has been announced for mine defence, clearing mines. So it's true that the Ukrainians are struggling to get it so low, but there is a question of how fair this report is, because a lot of it is effectively the German military, which is not the most experienced, and to be honest, not the most highly respected either, after massive budget cuts in the last 30 years and not much combat experience, saying, why are the Ukrainians promoting people with combat experience over people who've been trained by NATO in Germany? So the question is, is it the Bundeswehr's place to say that? Is it just them valuing their own tactics and not being open to others? I think it's fair to ask.
James, now that you've had access to this document, what else does it say about the war in Ukraine vis-a-vis what they've just said about their troops and the training of troops in Ukraine?
So effectively, the criticism by the Bundeswehr is that Ukraine is spreading its forces too thinly across the nearly 1,000-kilometre front line. I think that's understandable. The main tension here is that Western tactics work best when with groups together, or large groups of soldiers together, but are supported by air force and then artillery, which Ukraine doesn't really have. They're running out of shells, which is why they've had to now use cluster munitions, also quite controversial, and have very little, practically no air force to support these troops. So what the Ukrainians are doing is they've spread their forces wide to try and find a hole in the Russian defence, but the Russians have dug in very successfully, much more so than many observers had expected. So Ukraine's sort of probing different holes, potential holes in the chinks in the Russian armour, but they haven't been successful at finding that yet. And Ukraine, because they've lost so many casualties already, they're quite hesitant to send large groups together, and also hesitant to lose large amounts of Western weaponry, which of course then they would be criticised for by Bundeswehr and others as well, if they lost all of the 50 Leopard tanks, for example, by sending them into one area that didn't happen to be the right crack in the defensive. So it's a bit of a devil you do, devil you don't situation. That being said, this is a very unique situation. We haven't seen warfare like this in about 100 years in Europe, and I think it's easy for armchair generals to say, and actual generals who are very far away from the front lines to say, oh, they should be doing this, they should be doing that. But what the Ukrainians said back is that, let us fight, we don't want to lose our men, we don't want to lose our people and our equipment, and so they're trying to do as best as they can in a difficult situation, when of course the Russian lines are heavily mined, with Ukraine now being the most mined as well. But,
finally, let's talk about this continuing this Western support of tanks and artillery in Ukraine. really welcome to Ukraine, and also there is the support from the United States to nations. US aid Ukraine in the long run, and then also other critics who say that all the people Ukraine or Russia, what you find in their role, what's their leader, and I want to ask you that.
Sure. Very briefly, Houston, Russia stopped spending money on military, that's bordering. If Ukraine stopped getting funding for their military, Ukraine would. So this is an existential fight for Ukraine. I don't see that there's any other option for Ukrainian nationhood, but also for Western and European security, than to keep funding Ukraine and not just throw lots of money. We have to give them the right things that they need and what they say they need right now is air support and more artillery. And frankly, it's been disappointing to see Europe unable to create and get more footing economically to manufacture enough shells to support Ukraine because they are already outgunned in supplies. Russia has taken this very seriously, it's put a lot of its economy into creating weapons, and I think the West is attributing support for Ukraine and they want Ukraine to win, they need to do the same. But many Western leaders are still unclear whether they want Ukrainian victory or they just want Russia to stop. Those are two very different end results.
James Johnson for the journalist.
Thanks for having me.